Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the philosophy of Plato.
Ooh, exciting.
Now, Plato lived in ancient Athens,
Yeah.
and it was a pretty crazy time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was like right after all these years of war and like social upheaval.
So everything's changing.
Everything's changing, yeah. Imagine like trying to make sense of the world
Right.
when everything you thought you knew had been totally like turned upside down.
Yeah, it was a period that was like ripe for new ideas, new ways of thinking.
Oh, yeah, totally. And Plato, he was definitely one of the most influential thinkers to come out of that whole era.
For sure.
But before we can even get to Plato himself, we have to talk about his teacher.
Oh, his teacher. All right.
You probably heard of him.
Okay, let's hear it.
Socrates.
Ah, Socrates, of course. Yeah, he's kind of like the star of
Yeah.
most of Plato's writings, but there's this,
There's a problem.
yeah, there's a problem. There's a problem that scholars call the Socratic problem.
Okay, the Socratic problem.
We know Socrates mostly through Plato,
Right through his writings
his dialogues. Yeah, but how much of that is the real Socrates?
versus Plato's interpretation of Socrates.
Exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
is Plato giving us like a straight up biography?
Right.
Or is he kind of like, adding his own
His own spin on it.
philosophical spin on it?
Right.
And to make it even more complicated, other writers from that time period,
Okay.
like a guy named Xenophon,
Identify.
he paints a slightly different picture
Oh, really?
of Socrates, yeah. And even Aristotle, who came a bit later,
Okay.
he suggests that Plato and Socrates might have actually had some different ideas.
Different ideas. Okay.
About some pretty key concepts like the forms.
The forms.
We'll get into that later.
Okay, so we don't even know, like, for sure
Yeah.
if we have, like, a totally accurate picture of Socrates.
We might not. It's definitely something to keep in mind as we...
Yeah, we'll grain of salt.
Yeah, exactly, as we read Plato's work.
Okay.
But regardless of all that debate, Socrates' impact on Plato
Yeah, huge, right?
was absolutely massive. I mean, his method of questioning and dialogue.
Yeah, just constantly, like,
Yeah.
digging deeper and deeper.
Right, that relentless pursuit of truth through conversation.
Yeah,
It's like woven into the fabric of Plato's work.
totally. Like, I can see how that would shape someone's
Oh, yeah, for sure.
thinking in such a profound way.
Absolutely. And it's still relevant today.
Oh, for sure.
If you think about it, how much do we learn?
Through conversation.
Yeah, through dialogue, through bouncing ideas off of each other.
Totally.
That's a direct legacy of Socrates.
Totally. Okay, so we've got Socrates. He was a major influence, but he wasn't the only one who shaped Plato's ideas, was he?
Not at all. Remember the Pythagoreans?
Oh, right, yeah. Those were the math and music lovers.
Exactly.
Didn't they believe that numbers were like the key
Yes.
to understanding the universe?
They did. That emphasis on math and harmony
Yeah.
as like these underlying principles of reality
Right.
definitely found its way into Plato's thinking.
Good.
But then you also have like Heraclitus. He believed that the world was in this constant state of flux.
Oh, so everything's always changing?
Everything is always changing, yeah. And then you have Parmenides,
Okay.
and he believed in like this unchanging eternal being.
So those are like totally
Yeah,
different ideas, right?
Very much so. Yeah, how in the world did Plato
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Like,
Yeah.
he's pulling from all these different...
totally different directions?
Yeah.
And that's where his genius comes in.
Okay.
Plato managed to synthesize these seemingly contradictory influences into something new
Check.
and groundbreaking and original.
Right.
And that brings us to the heart of his philosophy, the theory of forms.
Okay, so the theory of forms,
Yeah.
I have to admit, I've always found this to be a little bit mind-bending.
Yeah. It can be a little out there.
Can you explain it like you're explaining it to a 5-year-old?
Okay, I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
All right, so imagine you're drawing a circle.
Okay.
It's never going to be perfectly round, right? There's always going to be little imperfections.
Right.
But what you're trying to capture is the idea
Yes.
of a perfect circle.
Right.
For Plato, the forms are these perfect, eternal, unchanging ideas that exist in a realm beyond our physical world.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
So the circles that we draw are just like copies.
Yes.
Like shadows of that perfect form of a circle that
Yeah.
exists somewhere out there.
You got it. And this applies to all concepts, not just shapes.
Oh, okay.
Beauty, justice, goodness. Everything we experience in the world is just an imperfect reflection of these ideal forms.
So we're living in a world of copies,
Yeah.
and the real deal is somewhere else.
That's the basic idea.
That is pretty wild.
It is a little trippy.
But if these forms are beyond our experience,
Right.
how do we even know about them? How can we access them?
Well, Plato had a theory about that too.
Okay.
He believed in a concept called anamnesis, which means recollection.
Okay. Anamnesis, recollection.
He thought our souls before we were born actually contemplated these forms directly.
Okay.
So for Plato, knowledge isn't about learning something new.
Okay.
It's about remembering what our souls have already seen.
So it's like, when you hear a song
Yeah.
and you're suddenly transported back to a specific memory,
Oh, yeah.
like you just get this like
Like a flashback.
like a flash of recognition.
Yeah, totally.
That's what he's talking about.
That's exactly what he was getting at.
Okay.
Plato believed those kinds of experiences are glimpses of our soul remembering knowledge from before we were born.
Okay. But if we have this like innate knowledge, why do we forget it? Why is it so hard to learn things?
So Plato thought that when we come into this world, our soul kind of forgets.
Oh.
The physical world with all its distractions and imperfections clouds our vision of these perfect forms.
Okay.
But through philosophy, through dialogue and reflection, we can start to remember and reclaim that innate knowledge.
So philosophy isn't just about, memorizing facts or anything. It's about rediscovering something.
Yes.
Like a part of ourselves that we've forgotten.
Yeah, I love that.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to think about it.
When it connects to that idea of the soul being immortal, right?
It does, which is another key part of Plato's philosophy.
Right. Speaking of the soul's journey, what did Plato think happened after death?
Oh, he had some thoughts about that.
Okay.
In the dialogue Phaedo, he tells this story called the myth of Ur.
Myth of Ur, okay.
And it's basically about the soul being judged and then either rewarded or punished based on how it acted during its life.
So there's a strong moral component to this.
Absolutely.
Similar to a lot of religions.
For sure, for Plato, the soul's fate after death was directly tied to how it lived in the physical world.
Right. Okay, so let's go back to the connection between the soul and the forms.
Okay.
How does that actually work?
Yeah.
How does the soul connect to these perfect ideas?
Plato believed that the soul, through reason, could actually rise above the limitations of the sensory world and actually contemplate these forms.
Okay.
And by doing so, it could get closer to truth and goodness.
So it's not just like passively remembering these forms.
No.
The soul has to actively engage with them.
Yeah, exactly. Reason is the key.
Right.
It's the part of the soul that allows us to go beyond our immediate experiences and grasp these higher truths.
So true knowledge isn't about what we see or hear or touch. It's about using our reason to connect to something deeper.
I like that.
Yeah, and this leads us to the concept of virtue.
It does.
For Plato, knowing the good wasn't just an intellectual exercise.
Yeah.
It had to be lived out.
It did.
So how do we become more virtuous?
How do we put this into practice?
Yeah.
Well, according to Plato, philosophy is the key.
Okay.
It's all about constantly reflecting, engaging in dialogue, and pursuing the truth.
Right.
This helps us break free from ignorance and live a more conscious, virtuous life.
So it's not enough to just know what's right.
Right.
You have to actually try to live it out.
You got to...
Right. And I know that Plato is really famous for his 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice.
Yes.
For Plato, a good life is one where all those virtues are in balance.
Yeah, working together in harmony.
Yeah. How do we do that?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
He thought that each virtue was connected to a different part of the soul.
Okay.
So wisdom is connected to reason,
Okay.
courage to the spirited part of us, temperance to our desires,
Okay.
and justice represents the harmony between all 3.
So he's kind of creating this map of the soul.
Exactly.
And how these different virtues fit together.
It's a really cool framework.
It is. Yeah, but what's the point?
Right. What's the goal of all this?
Yeah. Why do we even bother trying to be virtuous? What are we trying to achieve?
For Plato, the ultimate goal was happiness,
Happiness. Okay.
or what the Greeks called eudaimonia.
Okay, eudaimonia.
But it's not just about feeling good, or having fun. It's about living a fulfilling life in line with your true purpose.
So it's more like flourishing.
Yeah, like a plant reaching its full potential.
That's kind of a different idea of happiness
It is.
than what we have today.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Because today we think about happiness in terms of like
Yeah.
material possessions.
External things. Yeah, totally different perspective.
So for Plato, happiness is tied to living virtuously.
Yeah. Living in accordance with reason and virtue.
And that brings us to...
And that's a really powerful message.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's relevant today.
Absolutely.
Plato wasn't just interested in individual happiness. He was also thinking about like society as a whole.
He was.
Right? And his ideas about the ideal state are found in his work, The Republic.
That's right. And that's where we find one of his most controversial ideas.
Oh.
The philosopher case.
The philosopher case.
He actually thought that philosophers should be in charge.
That's going to ruffle some feathers.
I know, right?
Why philosophers? Why not like the warriors or the wealthy people?
Good question. So Plato believed that only those who truly know what is good can act for the good. And who knows the good better than philosophers who spent their lives contemplating these perfect forms?
So it's not just about being smart, it's about being ethical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He believed that philosophers, because of their deep understanding of truth and virtue, would be immune to the corrupting influences of power and greed.
That's a bold claim. But doesn't that sound a little bit like a dictatorship?
Well, it's interesting because while Plato was critical of Athenian democracy,
Okay.
he wasn't proposing an authoritarian regime.
Okay.
In his vision, philosophers wouldn't rule by force.
Wait.
They'd rule by guiding citizens towards the good.
Oh, so more like enlightened leadership.
Exactly.
Okay. But how would you even train a philosopher king?
Yeah, how do you prepare someone for that?
Yeah, I'm guessing a philosophy degree is not going to cut it.
You're right about that.
Yeah.
Plato had this idea for an incredibly rigorous education system that would start at a young age.
Oh, wow.
It would involve studying math, music, gymnastics, and, of course, philosophy.
So a well-rounded individual.
Exactly. He believed this holistic education would develop the mind, body, and spirit of future leaders.
Wow, it's like a philosophical boot camp.
It kind of is. But it makes sense when you think about his goal.
Yeah.
He was trying to create a society that was just harmonious and where everyone could reach their full potential.
Reach their full potential and live a truly happy life.
Exactly.
And that brings us to another interesting theme in Plato's work. Beauty.
Beauty.
Most people think of beauty as subjective,
Yeah.
like it's all a matter of taste.
Personal preference.
Yeah, but Plato had some different ideas about it.
He did, and that's actually where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so stay tuned.
Can't wait.
Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about how Plato thought philosophers should be like the rulers.
Oh, yeah, big idea.
Which I know sounds kind of crazy to us today, but
It's a little out there.
it is. Yeah, so now we're switching gears and we're going to talk about beauty.
Ooh, beauty.
And Plato had some pretty interesting ideas about beauty too.
He did. Yeah, it's easy to just dismiss beauty as, like purely subjective.
Yeah.
Just a matter of personal taste.
Yeah.
But Plato saw it as something much deeper and more profound.
Okay, so for Plato, if beauty isn't just about like what we personally find appealing, what is it?
Well, remember we were talking about the forms?
Yes.
Those perfect, eternal, unchanging ideas that exist like beyond the physical world.
Right.
Well, Plato believed that beauty itself is one of those forms.
So there's like this ultimate ideal form of beauty out there.
Uh-huh.
And everything that we think is beautiful here is just kind of like a reflection,
Yeah, it's like a copy.
a copy.
Yeah, like think about a beautiful sunset.
Okay.
It's breathtaking, right?
Yeah.
Awe-inspiring, but it fades.
Yeah.
The beauty that we see in that sunset or in a flower or in a work of art, it's fleeting.
Because it's part of this physical world
Right.
that's constantly in flux.
Yes, exactly. And it's decaying.
Yeah.
But for Plato, the beauty that we experience in these things is just like a glimpse, a shadow of the true form of beauty,
Right.
which is eternal and unchanging.
So the beauty we see is like a copy of the original
Exactly.
perfect beauty that exists somewhere else.
You got it.
But isn't that kind of depressing? Like, are we doomed to never experience true beauty?
Not at all. Plato believed that encountering beauty, even in these imperfect earthly forms, can have a really powerful effect on us.
What kind of effect?
Well, think about how you feel when you see something that's truly beautiful.
Okay.
A stunning landscape, a masterpiece of art,
Yeah.
even just a simple act of kindness.
Yeah.
It moves us, right?
It does.
It inspires us. It makes us want to, reach for something more.
Yeah, it's like this sense of wonder.
Uh-huh.
Almost like a longing for something greater than ourselves.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Plato believed that beauty acts as a kind of guide,
A guide. Okay.
a force that pulls us upward towards truth and goodness.
So it's not just about like aesthetics.
No.
It's about something much deeper.
It is, yeah. It's about our connection to something higher.
So beauty can lead us to truth. But how?
Well, Plato believed that beauty awakens in us this desire for something more perfect.
Okay.
Something beyond the limitations of the physical world. It makes us yearn for the ideal, for the eternal.
Yeah.
And that yearning can lead us to seek knowledge and understanding, to strive for a more virtuous life.
So beauty can actually motivate us to become better people.
Exactly. And this brings us to another important concept in Plato's philosophy. Love.
Love, okay.
Or eros, as the Greeks called it.
Love and beauty. Now we're talking.
So.
But how are those two connected in Plato's mind?
So Plato believed that eros is that driving force that makes us desire beauty.
Right.
But it's not just about physical attraction. It's
Yes.
about this deeper longing for beauty in all its forms.
Yeah.
Physical, spiritual, intellectual.
So it's more than just like romantic love.
Yeah, it's much broader than that.
Okay.
It encompasses a love of knowledge, a love of virtue, a love of truth.
So tell me more about this platonic love.
Okay, so in his famous dialogue, The Symposium,
The Symposium.
Plato describes love as an ascent.
An ascent.
Like climbing a ladder, but instead of rungs, it's different levels of beauty.
A ladder of beauty. I like
This is
that.
a powerful image.
Yeah.
He says we start at the bottom, attracted to physical beauty.
Oh,
But as we mature, we begin to appreciate beauty in other forms.
okay.
The beauty of a noble soul, the beauty of laws and institutions, the beauty of knowledge itself.
Yeah.
And ultimately, this ascent leads us to the contemplation of the form of beauty itself.
Wow. So it's a journey
It is a journey.
of growth and self-discovery,
Yeah,
fueled by this love of beauty.
exactly.
But it sounds pretty tough.
It's not easy.
What's the payoff?
Well, the payoff is nothing less than knowledge, truth, and happiness.
Okay.
Plato believed that eros, this love of beauty, is what drives us to seek our true good and to reach our full potential.
So it's not just about feeling good.
No.
It's about becoming the best version of ourselves.
Exactly. And Plato believed that this journey, this ascent towards beauty, is one of the most important things that we can do in life.
I remember reading that Plato used some pretty mystical language sometimes to describe this.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Like, didn't he talk about divine madness?
He did?
That sounds a little intense.
It does sound a little crazy.
Yeah.
But what he meant was that when the soul encounters true beauty,
Okay.
it can experience this kind of ecstasy,
Okay.
a state of heightened awareness that transcends ordinary experience.
So it's not about like losing your mind.
No.
It's more about expanding it.
Yes, exactly. It's about connecting with something larger than ourselves.
Okay.
Something that fills us with wonder and inspiration.
So beauty can inspire us,
Yeah.
love can guide us,
Uh-huh.
and through philosophy, we can try to become better, more virtuous people.
Yes, that's the idea.
That's a powerful message.
It is, and it's a message that still resonates with us today.
Yeah.
Plato's ideas about beauty, love, and the pursuit of truth are as relevant now as they were thousands of years ago.
Yeah, and I think in a world that's, becoming more and more complex and uncertain,
Yeah, for sure.
that's a really important message to remember.
I agree. Plato's work reminds us that the search for truth and meaning is a journey,
Yeah.
not a destination.
Right.
It's a process of constant questioning, dialogue, and self-discovery.
And on that note, I think it's time to shift gears one more time
Okay.
and talk about how Plato actually conveyed all these ideas.
Yeah, like how did he communicate all of this?
Yeah, because he didn't just write like straightforward essays or anything.
He didn't.
His writings are pretty unique.
They are. And that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
All right, so stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been exploring the world of Plato's philosophy.
Yeah, from those wild forms.
Yeah, those forms. To that idea that maybe philosophers should be in charge.
Oh, yeah, the philosopher kings.
Yeah, which I know is a little bit controversial.
Just a bit.
So in this last part, we're going to talk about how Plato actually conveyed his ideas, because he didn't just write like normal essays or anything like that.
He didn't know. That's one of the things that makes Plato so fascinating.
Yeah.
He chose to present his philosophy through dialogue.
Through dialogue. So
Yeah.
it's like we're listening in on a conversation.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Imagine a group of people gathered together having this lively debate,
Right.
challenging each other's ideas, trying to figure out the answers to these really big questions.
Yeah.
That's essentially what Plato's dialogues are like.
So instead of just laying out his ideas in a really systematic way,
Right?
he's presenting them through these dramatic conversations.
Exactly. And it makes his work so much more engaging.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You're not just passively reading information. You're actively following along with the arguments,
Yeah.
the twists and turns of the conversation.
It's like a philosophical mystery unfolding.
I love that. And of course, the star of most of these dialogues is
Socrates.
Socrates, exactly. He's usually the main character, using his method of questioning to challenge assumptions, expose contradictions, and ultimately lead his conversation partners towards the truth.
Yeah.
And us as readers, too.
Right, so Socrates is kind of like our guide.
Yeah, our guide through this world.
Through this world of Plato's philosophy.
I like that.
And what makes Socrates so compelling, I think, is that he never claims to have all the answers.
No, he's always questioning, always searching.
Yeah, always pushing for deeper understanding.
That's the key. And that's exactly what Plato wants us to do.
Right, he doesn't want us to just take his word for it.
No.
He's challenging us to think for ourselves.
Exactly. Plato's dialogues are an invitation to join the conversation.
Yeah.
To really grapple with those big questions, to never stop questioning and seeking the truth.
And I think that's one of the reasons why Plato's work is still so relevant today.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like over 2,000 years after he wrote it.
Yeah, it's incredible.
These ideas about the nature of reality, the importance of virtue, the power of love and beauty, they still like resonate with us.
They do. Yeah, Plato's philosophy isn't just a historical artifact.
Right.
It's this living tradition that continues to shape our understanding of ourselves and the world.
Yeah. And in a world that's, like increasingly complex and uncertain.
For sure.
I think that's like a really powerful thing.
I agree. Plato reminds us that the search for truth and meaning is a journey.
Yeah.
It's not about arriving at the final answer.
Right. It's about the process.
It's about the process, yeah. The constant questioning, the dialogue, the self-discovery.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into the world of Plato.
It has been a journey.
It has. I hope everyone listening has enjoyed it as much as we have.
Me too.
It's been amazing to explore these ideas.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
And keep on thinking.
And keep on questioning and keep on seeking.
Yes.
And until next time, keep on diving deep.